There was never a reason for us to believe that Bret the Hitman Hart would return to the WWE following the 1997 Montreal incident. After Survivor Series that year, Bret went to WCW and it seemed that his career would end here on a bittersweet note. Bret had some medical issues following his WCW release. The man suffered a stroke in 2002, which temporarily required him to use a wheelchair, and we all thought that the Hitman would never make a TV appearance again due to his ongoing health issues. It's been reported that in 2005, the WWE were getting ready to release a DVD titled Screwed, the Bret Hart Story, a DVD documentary in the same vein as the Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior release. The Screwed DVD would feature interviews from WWE staff, past and present, basically tarnishing whatever legacy Bret Hart had left on the business. It's been said also that Bret Hart agreed to work on a much more positive DVD release with the WWE in order to stop the Screwed documentary from ever getting produced and released. And this apparently is how Bret Hart first got back into working with the WWE. Bret claimed that the WWE essentially told him to get on board or we will run you over, in his words, mind you. So instead of Screwed, the Bret Hart story, we instead got Bret Hart, The Best There Is, The Best There Was, and The Best There Ever Will Be on DVD, a 3-disc set featuring a brand new sit-down interview with the Hitman, along with a selection of his best matches. I was a huge Bret Hart fan when I was younger, and when this DVD came out and I was much older, I still made sure to get it on the first day it was available here in the UK. I was very interested in how this would all be put together, how honest Bret Hart would be, and so on. The documentary didn't disappoint. I felt that it was done really well. A year after this DVD was released, it was also announced that Bret Hart would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Bret was inducted by Stone Cold Steve Austin, and his speech was good. It just seemed more bizarre seeing Bret Hart in a live WWE production after all these years, but his Hall of Fame induction was very much deserved, and it was great that he was able to get recognised here as one of the best in the business. Bret did not appear alongside his fellow inductees the next night at WrestleMania 22 though, something that forced the crowd to chant "We want Bret" periodically throughout the night. Bret said he was worried about being out there in front of a large audience. Those who have suffered a stroke in the past can have emotional imbalance issues, and Bret was just unsure how he would feel the night of WrestleMania. Bret made an appearance on the June 11th, 2007 edition of Raw, however he was only shown on the Titantron. This night was dedicated to Vince McMahon, a night that was dubbed the Mr. McMahon Appreciation Night. A video was shown here where Bret ripped into Vince, saying the best tribute he can pay to Vince is by giving him a punch in the face. Although this was a pre-taped segment, this was Bret's first appearance on Raw since October 27th, 1997. 2007 also saw the release of Bret Hart's autobiography, a book that fans have mixed feelings about. While the autobiography goes through Bret's entire WWF run in quite some detail and gives really interesting insight to life on the road, a lot of people criticise Bret for putting himself over way too frequently inside the pages. Nonetheless, Bret Hart stated in the book that he had no interest working for World Wrestling Entertainment, however he was eager to clear the air with Vince. Bret was not so eager to clear the air with Shawn Michaels at the time. The book shows us that he still had a lot of resentment for HBK, but that would change very soon. Fast forward to late 2009 and it's announced on Raw by Vince McMahon that Bret Hart would be a special guest host on the January 4th, 2010 edition of Monday Night Raw. This seemed crazy at the time. No one could have imagined this would happen. Of course, it was made all the more shocking due to Bret's book and the interviews he had given prior to this announcement. We all thought Bret would never go back, with those wounds of Montreal still unhealed after all this time. He was just so defiant about ever going back, but here we are, it was going to happen. The Hitman would return to Raw and return to the WWE. It really just can't be overstated how big of a deal this was, especially for those who watched the WWF throughout 1997 and beyond. The timing was also quite tactical, as Hulk Hogan would be making his debut also on the January 4th 2010 edition of TNA Impact, their first live show to go head to head with Monday Night Raw. Raw destroyed TNA in the ratings that evening. Bret Hart said, "I just woke up one day and realised I would be carrying a tag forever," in reference to the Montreal Screwjob. "If I leave it the way it is, it will always be an open wound. Even though we had bridged most of the issues we had, I thought if I was ever going to do something like this, I would have to start to do it now." So the January 4th 2010 edition of Raw kicked off with Bret Hart making his way down the ramp and getting back into a WWE ring. The first thing I remember noticing is that Bret was given a new updated theme song here, and also the WWE had produced a new Titantron video for Bret along with new merchandise. This instantly made me think that this isn't a one-off appearance. The WWE had gone through too much trouble here for this just to be a one and done deal. The audience pop was insane, the crowd here seeing something that they never thought would be possible. Bret got into the ring, and the first thing he said was, "Well, I guess hell froze over." Bret said that it's been 12 years since he has been back in the WWE and it's an amazing feeling. Bret then said he was grateful to have this opportunity to talk to the WWE Universe, and he thanked his fans for never forgetting about him after all these years. Bret then asks Shawn Michaels to come to the ring, so strap yourselves in guys, this should be good. It's been said that this was legitimately the first time that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels had talked to each other since the Montreal incident, and everything that was said and done here was very real. Take that information whatever way you want. It did seem far-fetched to me at the time, but both Bret and Shawn have stated that this was indeed the first time they looked at each other eye to eye since Montreal in 1997. Bret says straight away that he wants to bury the hatchet with Shawn and call for a truce. Shawn grabs a mic and tells Bret that he deserves what happened to him in Montreal, and this gets some serious boos from the audience. I was quite taken back by this also. I thought it would have been a firm handshake and all is forgotten, but no, Shawn goes right for the throat here, and if we are to believe that none of this was scripted or rehearsed, I'm sure the Hitman was taken back by Shawn's comments also. Shawn goes on to say that Bret disrespected him and disrespected the company before finally admitting to Bret's face that he was indeed involved in screwing Bret in Montreal back in '97. Shawn says that things have changed over the years, a lot of things have changed in his life, and he says that when he thinks of Bret Hart, he doesn't think of Montreal, but he thinks of WrestleMania 12 and the Iron Man match. Shawn says that Bret isn't the only one carrying the baggage for all these years, and he isn't the only one who wants to bury the hatchet. Bret says that Shawn wasn't the easiest guy to work with all those years ago, and he had his fair share of issues, but he agrees that both men's careers should not be defined by Montreal. Bret offers his hand to Shawn in friendship, saying that this is now the opportunity for both men to end the hostility and put everything behind them. Shawn shakes Bret's hand and then walks away. It seems for a moment that Shawn was going to tune up the band and deliver sweet chin music, but he turns back and gives Bret a hug. As Shawn leaves the ring, Bret asks Vince McMahon to come to the ring so they can iron out their differences also, but Vince doesn't appear. When we return from the commercial break, Vince says backstage that Bret doesn't call Vince out, everything is done on Mr. McMahon's terms. Vince will call Bret to the ring later in the evening. During the remainder of the broadcast, Bret Hart acted as the special guest host, setting up matches and being part of a few backstage segments. Chris Jericho even asks Bret to referee a match between Jerry Show and DX, letting Bret know that when Y2J puts in the walls of Jericho, he should act on instinct and ring the bell. Bret declines, saying he isn't a hypocrite like Chris Jericho. The final segment of Raw then saw Vince McMahon in the ring announcing that next week's guest host will be Iron Mike Tyson. Bret interrupts the announcement by coming to the ring for a face-to-face confrontation. Bret takes off his jacket as Vince McMahon asks him to be the better man, saying that he wants both men to sort out their differences. Vince goes on to say he really does believe Bret screwed Bret. Vince says he will never forget Bret spitting on him and punching him backstage in Montreal, but he wants Bret to speak to him and he wants Bret to apologise. Bret says he is at Raw for closure. He had a good talk with Shawn and he wants to have the same closure with Vince. Vince agrees that he wants the same closure that the Hitman wants, going on to praise Bret's career by saying that Bret Hart became the excellence of execution within the WWE. Vince even announces that Bret's father Stu will be inducted into the Hall of Fame before thanking Bret Hart for every thrilling moment he gave to his fans. The two shake hands and Vince raises Bret's arms in the air, and just as it seemed like the story had ended, Vince McMahon delivered a low blow to Bret as the crowd filled the arena with boos. Now, this moment would have been enough to annoy a lot of Bret Hart fans, but I remember thinking that this was actually a good thing. If the hatchet wasn't buried, then maybe Bret Hart would get his revenge, meaning we would likely be seeing more of the Hitman in future. The new entrance theme, the merchandise, and this ending here led me to believe that we would be seeing more of Bret Hart. The following week, Vince McMahon tried to kill our hopes by announcing that Bret would never be seen in the WWE again, saying Vince got his closure by leaving Bret lying in the ring after delivering that low blow. The following week, Vince McMahon was interrupted by World Champion The Undertaker. Undertaker tells Vince that he screwed Bret Hart, and now he is terrified of the consequences. Triple H explains to Vince McMahon later in the broadcast that the world will think he is afraid of Bret if he doesn't go out there and call him out. The week after this, Vince tells the audience that there just isn't a good business reason to bring Bret Hart back to the WWE, and after announcing that Bret won't be seen again, John Cena hits the ring to remind Vince that it was the superstars of the past who built the Vince McMahon empire, and it seems that Vince McMahon throws superstars to the curb whenever they have reached their expiry date. Cena tells Vince that he has to invite Bret to Raw next week to prove that the superstars of the past mean something to the legacy of the WWE, and if he doesn't, then once John Cena hits his expiry date, he will come looking for Vince and, quote, knock his teeth down his throat. Vince says he isn't afraid of Bret Hart, and he announces that Bret is invited to Raw the following week. So here we go again. The February 1st edition of Raw would see Bret and Vince once again in the ring. Bret starts things off by saying that he came back to the WWE for all the right reasons. He wanted to put Montreal behind him, but it turns out Vince McMahon wouldn't allow that, and Bret now wants Vince in the ring to settle the score. After Vince makes his way down the ramp, Bret said that he would be more than willing to beat Vince up right here, right now, after talking about how Vince made him feel pathetic after he kicked him in the gut. Vince says he has no idea what the people see in Bret Hart, saying that Bret has zero personality and zero charisma before telling Bret that he deserved to get screwed. Vince announces that he has rethought Stu Hart's Hall of Fame induction, saying that Stu doesn't deserve it, which leads Bret Hart to unload on Vince. Bret lays in the punches before Batista hits the ring, putting a beatdown on Bret and leaving him in the middle of the ring. The broadcast ended with Vince McMahon spitting on Bret's face, payback here for Montreal in 1997. The next week on Raw, John Cena told Vince McMahon that he heard Bret Hart saying something he thought he would never say again. John tells Vince that Bret Hart wants to wrestle another WrestleMania match, and he wants his opponent to be Vince McMahon. Cena tells Vince that this is his chance to prove he isn't about the money and he's about the moment. Vince says that he will face Bret at WrestleMania, and the show goes off the air after Bret attacks Vince, which causes Mr. McMahon to cancel the match at Mania. On the February 15th edition of Raw, Bret comes to the ring to say goodbye to the fans. Bret said he had his heart set on giving Vince McMahon what he deserved at WrestleMania, but it isn't going to happen thanks to Vince ducking out of the showdown. Bret thanks the superstars of the WWE for welcoming him into their locker room, and he thanks the fans for allowing him to come back. Bret waves goodbye and heads backstage, and it seemed like this was it for Bret Hart's return. The cameras go backstage with Bret as Bret says goodbye to the WWE roster. Bret catches up with John Cena, who tries to talk the Hitman into staying, but it's no use. The camera pans away from Bret as he gets into his limo, and just at that moment, We hear the sound of another car smashing into Bret's vehicle. It seems that Bret got his leg caught in the limo door and he is seriously hurt. I must admit I had no idea where they were going with this at the time, but anyway, Bret is taken out of the limo and put into an ambulance. The next week on Raw, Vince McMahon announces that he had nothing to do with the car accident and he invites Bret to come to Raw the following week. He wants to give Bret another opportunity to say farewell, saying that Bret's exit from the WWE shouldn't end this way. The next week, Vince McMahon makes his way to the ring, wanting to have the honour here of inviting Bret to the ring to say goodbye. Bret comes to the ring wearing a cast on his leg and aided by a crutch. Vince then says that he lied about wanting to give Bret a chance to say goodbye, and instead he invited Bret there to once again humiliate him. Vince, seeing that Bret is now incapacitated, says he is now willing to participate in the WrestleMania 26 match as originally planned. Vince tries to goad Bret into agreeing to the match, but Bret tells Vince he can't wrestle due to having a broken leg. Vince says that Bret is letting himself down and he's also letting his fans down before kicking his crutch away, again leaving Bret Hart laid out in the middle of the ring. When Vince goes to leave the ring, Bret agrees to the match, much to Vince's delight. 2 weeks later though, during the contract signing for the match, Bret revealed that the leg injury wasn't legitimate. It was all a big act that was devised to get Vince McMahon to agree to the WrestleMania match. Bret, of course, waited until Vince signed his name before taking the cast off and setting it on the table. I thought this segment was done really well. Credit to everyone involved, including Stone Cold Steve Austin. So the WrestleMania no holds barred match then, and I wish I could end here on a high note, but the match simply wasn't good. There were reports from your usual dirt sheet outlets saying that due to Bret receiving a Lloyd's of London insurance payout previously, that this stopped Bret from taking bumps during the showdown with Vince. Dirt sheet writer Brian Alvarez even reported that the WWE was sweating about the whole situation, not knowing if the Hart vs McMahon match would even be able to happen. These same dirt sheet writers also claimed that the match went down the way it did because, get this, Vince McMahon was trying to turn himself into a babyface over the course of the match. It's absolutely astounding what people will write or say in order to grab headlines or sell newsletters instead of just reporting the truth. It was a horribly booked attraction match with 2 limited competitors, one of which was a stroke survivor who was already going to great lengths in order to be part of WrestleMania. Anyway, Vince McMahon starts the match by saying he has bought the whole Hart family and they all come to ringside in order to turn on Bret. Bret announces that blood is thicker than water, and again Vince McMahon has been bamboozled as the whole Hart family attack him. Bret beats up Vince with anything he finds around the ring, and in the end, Vince submits to the sharpshooter. The match was simply a vehicle to sell more pay-per-views. It was an attraction match, and if anyone went into this thinking it would be a wrestling showcase, well, I really don't know what to say. After the WrestleMania match, Bret stayed with the WWE and made appearances throughout the year, first of all standing alongside the Hart Dynasty, and he even eventually won the US title. Bret was also named the general manager of Raw, but this didn't last very long. He competed at SummerSlam 2010, teaming up with WWE superstars to take on The Nexus in a 7-on-7 tag match, but again his physicality was kept to a minimum. In November of 2010, Bret's contract expired, however he would still make odd appearances as the years went on. After the May 27th, 2013 edition of Raw, the WWE held a Bret Hart Appreciation Night, and in May 25th, 2019, Bret Hart became a 2-time Hall of Famer when he and Jim Neidhart were inducted as the Hart Foundation.